Remove and replace parts. HP Z2 SFF G1i Workstation Desktop PC. How to replace the access panel. No tools are required to remove or install this assembly. Removal. Loosen the thumb screw on the rear of the computer. Slide the access panel back and then lift it off the computer. Replacement. Position the access panel on top of the computer at a slight offset. Push the access panel forward into place. Tighten the thumb screw to secure the access panel. How to replace the optical drive. No tools are required to remove or install this assembly. Before you begin, remove the access panel. Removal. Disconnect the power and data cables from the rear of the optical drive. Push the release latch on the back of the drive and then slide the drive forward and out of the front of the computer. Replacement. Slide the optical drive into the front of the computer until it is fully seated. Connect the power and data cables to the rear of the optical drive. How to replace the front bezel. No tools are required to remove or install this assembly. Before you begin, remove the access panel and the optical drive. Removal. Release the 3 tabs that secure the bezel to the computer. Rotate the top of the bezel downward and then pull the bezel off the front of the computer. Replacement. Align the bezel with the front of the computer. Position the bottom edge of the bezel first, then rotate the top upward into place. Press the 3 tabs to secure the bezel to the computer. How to replace the drive cage. No tools are required to remove or install this assembly. Before you begin, remove the access panel, front bezel, and the optical drive. Removal. Lift up on the front of the drive cage. Remove the cables from the cable guides on the drive cage. Remove the drive cage. Replacement. Insert the 2 drive cage tabs into the slots on the computer at an angle. Route the cables through the cable guides on the drive cage. Lower the drive cage into position. How to replace the memory modules. No tools are required to remove or install this assembly. Before you begin, remove the access panel, front bezel, drive cage, and the optical drive. Removal. Press down on the latches that secure the memory module. Remove the memory module from the socket. Avoid touching the gold pins on the memory module. Doing so may damage the module. Replacement. Insert the memory module into the socket. Press the module down into the socket until the module is fully inserted and properly seated. How to replace the battery. Tools for the task. Flat-bladed pry tool. Before you begin, remove the access panel, front bezel, drive cage, and the optical drive. Removal. Squeeze the latch and then lift the battery cover to remove it. Press in on the metal clamp that extends above one edge of the battery to release it. Remove the battery. Replacement. With the positive side up, insert the new battery onto the battery socket at an angle. Press the battery down until it snaps into place. Lower the cover onto the battery socket. Press the cover down until it snaps into place. How to replace the wireless LAN module. Tools for the task: Phillips screwdriver and tweezers. Before you begin, remove the access panel, front bezel, drive cage, and the optical drive. Removal. Remove the Phillips screw that secures the module to the computer. Pull the module out of the socket. Remove the plastic shield that covers the antennas. Disconnect the antenna cables from the module. Use caution to not damage the cables. A damaged cable can degrade performance. Remove the wireless LAN module. Replacement. Connect the antennas to the wireless LAN module. Use caution to not damage the cables. A damaged cable can degrade performance. Replace the shield that covers the antennas. Insert the wireless LAN module into the socket. Replace the Phillips screw that secures the wireless LAN module. How to replace the system fan. No tools are required to remove or install this assembly. Before you begin, remove the access panel, front bezel, drive cage, and the optical drive. Removal. Disconnect the fan cable from the system board connector. Press the release lever and slide the fan assembly away from the power supply. Lift the fan assembly out of the computer. Replacement. Lower the fan assembly into the computer. Slide the fan assembly toward the power supply until it locks into place. Press the release lever if needed to secure it. Reconnect the fan cable to the system board connector. How to replace that SSD. Tools for the task: Phillips screwdriver. Before you begin, remove the access panel, front bezel, drive cage, and the optical drive. Removal. Remove the Phillips screw that secures the SSD to the system board. Pull the SSD away from the socket to remove it. Replacement. Align the pins on the SSD with the socket on the system board. Insert the SSD into the socket at an angle until it is fully seated. Replace the Phillips screw that secures the SSD. How to replace the power supply unit. Tools for the task: torque screwdriver. Before you begin, remove the access panel, front bezel, system fan, drive cage, and the optical drive. Removal. Disconnect the 4 power supply cables from the system board connectors. Remove the power supply cables from the side clips, front clips, and clips in front of the power supply. Remove the 3 torque screws that connect the power supply to the rear of the chassis. Press the release lever at the front of the power supply, slide the power supply toward the front of the computer, and then lift the power supply out of the computer. Replacement. Lower the power supply into the chassis and slide it toward the rear of the computer until it is fully seated. Replace the 3 torque screws that secure the power supply to the rear of the chassis. Route the power supply cables through the clips and cable guides. Connect the 4 power supply cables to the appropriate system board connectors. How to replace the speaker. No tools are required to remove or install this assembly. Before you begin, remove the access panel, front bezel, system fan, drive cage, and the optical drive. Removal. Disconnect the speaker cable from the system board connector. Remove the rubber posts from the clips on the speaker and then remove the speaker. Replacement. Place the speaker in position. Insert the 2 rubber posts that hold the speaker. Reconnect the speaker cable to the system board connector. How to replace the rear fan. No tools are required to remove or install this assembly. Before you begin, remove the access panel. Removal. Disconnect the fan cable from the system board connector. Lift the fan straight up and out of the computer. Replacement. Position the fan in its mounting location in the computer. Press the fan straight down until it is fully seated. Connect the fan cable to the system board connector. How to replace the heatsink. Tools for the task: torque screwdriver and thermal grease. Before you begin, remove the access panel and the rear fan. Removal. Disconnect the fan cable from the system board connector. In the order indicated on the heatsink, loosen the 4 captive torque screws. Remove the heatsink from the computer. Thoroughly clean the thermal material from the surfaces of the heatsink and the system board components each time the heatsink is removed. Replacement. Apply a small amount of thermal grease to the processor shield. Position the heatsink over the processor, aligning it with the screw holes. In the order indicated on the heatsink, tighten the 4 captive torque screws to secure the heatsink. Reconnect the fan cable to the system board connector. How to replace the processor. No tools are required to remove or install this assembly. Before you begin, remove the access panel, rear fan, and the heatsink. Caution: do not touch the pins in the processor socket. Removal. Pull the locking lever away from the processor, then rotate the lever to its fully open position. Raise and rotate the processor retainer to its fully open position. Carefully lift the processor from the socket and remove. Replacement. Carefully lower the processor into the socket. Position the processor so that the marking on the corner, usually a triangle or an arrow, matches the corresponding marking on the socket. Lower the processor retainer. Lower the locking lever to secure the processor. How to replace the antennas. Tools for the task: torque screwdriver. Before you begin, remove the access panel, front bezel, optical drive, and the drive cage. Removal. Remove the 2 torque screws that secure the antennas on the front of the computer. Remove the antenna cables from the clips and tape on the front of the computer. Pull the antenna cables out through the holes in the front of the computer. Replacement. Thread the antenna cables through the holes in the front of the computer. Route the antenna cables into the clips and secure them with the tape on the front of the computer. Replace the 2 torque screws that secure the antennas. How to replace the system board. Tools for the task: torque screwdriver. Before you begin, remove the access panel, optical drive, front bezel, system fan, rear fan, memory modules, drive cage, wireless LAN module, SSD, and the processor. Removal. Remove the torque screw that secures the front I/O bracket to the computer. Rotate the left side of the bracket away from the computer and remove. Disconnect all cables from the system board and make note of their locations for replacement. Remove the 5 Torx screws that secure the system board to the computer. Slide the system board toward the front of the computer and then lift it up and out of the computer. Replacement. Lower the system board into the chassis and slide it toward the rear of the computer until it is fully seated. Replace the 5 Torx screws that secure the system board to the computer. Reconnect all cables to the system board. Position the front I/O bracket so the right side is aligned, then rotate the left side toward the computer. Replace the Torx screw that secures the front I/O bracket to the computer.